Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Good Business Fortnight's second day, which is DE&I Tuesday. And I'm Jack. I'm the Social Impact and Sustainability Manager at Aviva, and I lead on our Good Business Charter relationship. And I'm really pleased to have a webinar for you today on our employee resource groups. So before we get started with that content, just want to remind everyone what the Good Business Fortnight is and what is all about. And so we are, like I said, we're in day 2, and this is a fortnight awareness week, looking at how the Good Business Charter supports businesses across the UK, and how they can encourage business not just to be for profit, but for all stakeholders and make a true impact on society. So we're on week 1, and this is ED&I Tuesday, or DE&I Tuesday. And there are lots of events that you can get involved with over the 2 weeks. So do continue to sign up for events on the Good Business Charter website. And like I said, today for ED&I Tuesday, we are looking at employee resource groups. So how we can develop a diverse, equal, and inclusive culture, and how that's essential for our business to thrive, or businesses in general to thrive as well. And I'm really pleased to have our Director, Inclusion and Diversity, Inclusion and Resourcing Director, Jonny Briggs, on the call, who's going to walk us through and lead to talk about our D&I initiatives internally. Just a bit of housekeeping. There is a Q&A function. Let me just press the plus and then type in your question, and I can mediate questions throughout, so don't feel like you have to ask them at the end. If there is a burning question, I'll stop Jonny and take the question there and then. And the session is also being recorded as well. So over to you, Jonny. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jack. And hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time out to join. So in terms of who we are, first of all, because this is where it's quite difficult in terms of DEI, that, we're Aviva, we're an insurance company that is the #1 in the UK, we're #2 in Canada, #2 in Ireland. So we're a big company, we're a FTSE top 50 company. And quite often when I have these conversations about communities, for a smaller organization, it can be slightly daunting. And I want to take that away, and please take out of it what you want to take out of it. You're not going to be able to do everything that we do. Equally, we have some priorities that might be slightly different to where you're going because of, the length of time you've been trading or the size of your organization or whatever. So all I would encourage you to do is, even if it's 1 or 2 things you want to take away, that would be brilliant. And thank you for joining during what is quite a challenging time for diversity, equity and inclusion. And it is getting a lot of coverage. And you know what? I think scrutiny is not a bad thing. So if somebody scrutinizes Aviva, I have to be confident that what we're doing is the right thing, that the talent programs that we got are there to help everybody in our organization. And hopefully as you go through this from the colleague point of view in terms of employee resource groups, you'll see that that is the case. Because it's really important when you're doing something that you're fair, that you're looking at all communities. And hopefully at the end of this, that you'll be able to see that that is the case, and that everybody has a role to play in this space, because we're all multifaceted, and we've all got difference, and we've all come from different experiences that we want to embrace and help us to reflect the marketplaces that we trade in. So please ask questions as we go through this. At any point, Jack will jump in and say, Jonny, someone wants to ask something, because I'd rather tackle it there and then. We have a good bit of time, so it would rather answer something there and get some debate rather than wait to the end. But if that suits you better to wait to the end, then please do so. So let me just go through and talk to you a bit about our DEI strategy to start with. So this is the one slide that will be less so around the communities, but just gives you a bit of idea of what we're saying and what we're wanting to do. So if you just look at the overarching ambition, we're an inclusive workplace where everyone feels that they can belong. Everyone. That's a really important point. So it's about making sure that wherever we ask the question, I can be myself at work, and I'll give you the results in the next slide. how you feel, how you can be yourself is individual to you, and that's what the really important thing is. And it will also might be around many different aspects rather than just one. So that's our overall ambition. What do we want to do? We want to make sure that we've got, so this area, data governance and accountability, I would put that in one word in terms of commerciality. You've got to make sure that you've got the data to back up what you're going to do. You've got to have some kind of governance and accountability. So by that we mean that we have senior stakeholders that are invested in the communities. And the accountability is that, well, if you say you're going to go and do something, in the same way you're going to say you're going to do anything, make sure that you go and do it. So I'll talk to you a wee bit more about some of how that plays out. The people and the culture bit so incredibly important. So we want everyone to thrive in our organization, and everybody will come from come at things at a different pace, and they'll learn differently, and we just want to make sure that everybody has the chance to do that, and a culture that encourages that individual to thrive is what's important. And the final thing that's important to us is in terms of customer community. So we've got to reflect our customer base. So if we look around the UK, we know that the UK, it's around 20% of the population will have a neurodiverse condition. We'll know that in different parts there will be higher or greater, less of ethnic diversity in terms of the locations. So what we've got to do is make sure that we are reflecting the customer base that we trade in. In terms of the wider community, it's important for us that we work with partners who share our values. My very strong view is that we should be narrow in terms of the number of partners, because there are so many different really good partners out there. But my view is go with a smaller number, so actually we say one for each of the 6 communities, but then have a deep relationship with them, get to know them and they get to know us, and then build on that relationship, rather than trying to do lots and actually not achieving a huge amount. And so that's frustrating sometimes for those that want to work with you, but I do think it's the right strategy to try and make sure that we're getting we're getting the best kind of corporate kind of guidance from a smaller number of partners. So I'll spend quite a bit of time in terms of this slide, and I hope you like the little graphic that we've created. I will not take credit for that, the one on the right hand side, you're in the community. So the first thing is we have got ambitions in terms of what we want our organization to look like. So ambitions around the size of our women and ethnically diverse leadership populations. So if you take women, 51% of colleagues at Aviva are women. We would like 41% of them to be leaders. So we've just achieved that ambition, and we are our chief exec is the Women in Finance Government Champion in regard to helping to try and ensure there is better representation. Similarly, in terms of ethnic diversity, we are not achieving where we want to get to in regard to that. The talent pool within the organisation is smaller than it is for women, so therefore there's more work that we would need to do in regard to that. What's really important is that middle section in terms of inclusion metrics. So leadership effectiveness on inclusion is over 90%. That's brilliant. So we're really pleased. But what I want to talk to you a bit about is what does that mean? What does leadership effectiveness? Does that mean? Doesn't mean you're on a march. It just means you're showing an interest in this space and the individuals within their team. You're maybe sharing a bit more about it in terms of yourself. And the environment around you. That's what we want to see, so that people can feel confident about kind of asking for more help them to thrive in the organization. Psychological safety purely means you can be yourself. So for me, I come with many characteristics, and some of which you can see below. I want to make sure that I can be myself. I'm not hiding in any way who I am at work, and that ensures that I can then thrive and ensures that I can be engaged and productive. And then belonging is a term that's less well used in the UK, but is very more established in the US. Belonging to the organisation. Do you feel that you belong? That is about the kind of inclusion side. So the diversity is about the representation, whereas the belonging is about the feeling part of the organisation. So the next small bit, that kind of pink box, demographic data, is what we ask every one of our colleagues in regard to helping us to understand the makeup of colleagues in the organisation. And this is, I think, sometimes where people kind of maybe don't necessarily understand the kind of broadness of diversity, where there's very much a focus that some would say in terms of more gender and ethnicity, and actually it's not, it's everything. And if you look at age, that first one that we highlight there, I mean, that is unquestionably an area that we need to put some focus, as we have very different generations in the workplace, and we need to, we need to learn from each other. We need to understand each other. We need to then help each other to be to help the organization succeed. But we need all of the different generations within the organization to thrive. And to be candid, that's an area that we've had some challenges with, within and what I see externally as well. And there's different ways of working. There's different language, so we just need to make sure that we take care of that. And I'll talk a bit about that sits in our generations community. Caring, disability, gender identity, neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is something for us that's really, really, really moving. Then there's race and ethnicity, religion, faith, sexual orientation, social and economic background. So that's the background that an individual will come from in terms of their parental occupation is the key. It's not an exclusive, it's the key indicator. So we ask colleagues what their parents' occupation was at the age of 14, and that is a good indicator. And for anyone who asks, it's not perfect, but it's a fairly good indicator in regard to that. And then just a bit about work patterns, the way that people work as well. So there's a question actually from Rachel. Am I okay, Jack, to just go straight in and answer that question?
Yeah, do it. Yeah, that sounds good, Jonny.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you for asking the question, Rachel. For those who can't see, it says, we find that people often default to thinking diversity is about visual differences. Do you have any suggestions for how to increase awareness and for more hidden diversities? So there's a few things that we do, but it is really hard, Rachel, and a lot of it, unfortunately, comes down to how much the individual or the colleague trusts the organisation they're willing to then share. So we, for example, you might see my lanyard. My lanyard has the 6 different communities, and for me, that's really important because it's about all 6, and historically there was some competition between our different communities, and actually what I want to have is something that everyone would see. However, within and I'm about to talk about our ability community, which includes, for example, neurodiversity, there are those that have a lanyard that says either a badge or the lanyard that said I have a hidden disability. We also include that, and a number of people choose to include that on their auto signatures. The beauty of technology is you can include it now in Teams. So there's lots of ways in which, if you are courageous and able to do so, and the organisation, you trust the organisation, you can then share in that kind of regard. But that takes a bit of time. And so that's the challenge. It's about, so where we've got to is we've really grown ability to one of our major communities. We've got an action plan behind it, which I'll go on and talk about. And we're encouraging them to talk more about it. So there's no question. It is, it's all, the onus is more on the onus on the individual, but as long as they're given a great platform by the organisation in terms of trust. Brad McLaughlin, you spoke briefly at the beginning about global headwinds. Could you expand on that and how those might impact the UK and the wider DI space? So Brad, my view in terms of I think scrutiny is good, and I said that at the beginning. You've got to be able to back what you're doing in terms of it's the right thing to do, and actually. Albeit it might have come with some language that some people might not like. I sit back and look at everything we're doing and going, am I doing something for everybody? Am I doing positive action and not positive discrimination? Just for anyone that wouldn't be clear in regard to that, so positive action in the UK from the 2010 Equality Act says that if there are groups that are disadvantaged, you can do some activity to help get them to the same platform, same level. What you cannot do is positively discriminate, and we would never wish to positively discriminate. And that is whereby you make the call that you're going to hire a particular characteristic. So it might be gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ+, whatever. And that's wrong, really wrong. So from my perspective, what I'm quite keen to make sure I do is that we have programs and activities of work that satisfy absolutely everybody. And that's what I'm going to quickly just go through and talk through the communities. And I see there's another quick question, so bear with me. Let me get through this slide and then I can go straight back to those 2 questions from Mo and Zahid, so bear with me. I ask everybody whenever I'm talking about our communities, look at the 6 communities, look at yourself and think, which one would I join? Where have I got energy to join these particular these communities, and I'll just talk them through where they are. So ability is around neurodiversity and physical disability, and what we are currently trying to do is create a neurodiverse action plan. We've got a neurodiverse hub because that is a population that I don't think we've helped to thrive, and I think we need to. Balance is gender. Carers, we include parents. Some organisations don't. What that has meant is we have got this group that are, it's the largest in terms of the communities, and we are sharing, and there are those that I think never shared around the challenges, for example, of parenting, of nurseries, and all working families. That is something that's worked out really, really well for us in regard to what they're able to kind of share. Interestingly, we found a lot of carers didn't want to share that they were carers. And so the Pride community, who are better known in terms of maybe coming out in terms of sexual orientation, then spoke to the carers community, but this is how you can have come out. So with some really good work that's worked across the different that worked across different communities. Generations is that first one I mentioned, that's age. 5 different generations in the workplace. We're part of what's going to be a generations index. I have a personal fascination around this because I really think this is an area that we can, organizations that get this right can do really well. And by getting it right, I mean by making sure you're spending the time to understand that people will come to work with some sort of different mentality, different ways of working, and we've got to make sure that that works for all in the working environment. Origins is social economic mobility, ethnicity, and faith. And yes, there's a lot in there. And there are some intersects. So in the UK, if you're ethnically diverse, it is more likely that you'll be from a lower social economic background, albeit it's a smaller size population. So there's a lot of things within that area. And it's had some real challenges. All communities are good, but that group has had some challenges. The final one, which also has had a lot of challenges, is Pride. So that's LGBTQ+. It's probably our most longest standing. And just some of the challenges we've had, there are that as an organisation, we're a big insurer, and we have for many, many years supported a number of Pride parades across the UK. But this year, unfortunately, we had to pull out of 3 because there was some commentary around people not wanting insurers to be part of their parades, and that was a real shame for our colleagues. But they are the number 1 priority, so we very quickly made the call that we weren't going to go and do that. So look at those and think. So if you in an organisation don't have employee resource groups, which ones would you set up first? You can't set them all first. Where's the energy? Go with that, and then building that would be my sort of guidance. I'm just going to quickly go and answer 2 of the questions. So, Mo, it's great to see we're improving on gender balance between male, female overall, and especially in senior roles. Are we, or organisations overall, starting to think about looking at non-binary transgender balance in the workplace too? I think we definitely are. I think what I would say in regard to those targets, so we set them a number of years ago. I would want to be less target orientated and more cultural orientated. So that actually, rather than turn around and just saying how many do we have. So I know the rough percentage around those that are, gender non-conforming, non-binary, trans in the organisation, because they trust the organisation enough that they confidentially, and no one can identify by an individual, tell us the size of that population. And by doing the activity, so for example, you can now put MX as a title on our products, which, believe me, with legacy computers is really hard. So I think it's more about culture than it would be around targets that we would do, but it's a very, very important point that we need to address. Jim, what influence do the various communities have on company policy? Lots. So let me give you some examples. So they were part of the carers community helped the organisation understand the importance of carers leave, and we therefore now have paid carers leave, 35 hours a year carers are entitled to. There are some things that the criteria around what that is, but they've certainly helped us in terms of that. You may be aware that we have got 6 months parental leave for all parents, whatever the circumstance around in terms of parenting. That was an organisational thing, but the communities have been part of the kind of the group that have helped us to reap the benefits by encouraging everybody to make sure they would take that, because in the beginning, believe it or not, a lot of men didn't take that. And so and they're genuinely invaluable. Zahid has asked, we can see and have experienced the benefits of diversity within our organisation. However, external factors can and will influence Aviva's view in DEI. For example, being Trump's rhetoric in DEI. How does Aviva strike a balance between what actually works for Aviva versus the external pressure following the market? I think, Zahid, what I would say to you is this is probably about what you then choose to amplify. So we will carry on with everything we're doing in regard to Aviva. It's really important to us that all these communities thrive. You won't find us on Twitter or X, whatever your preferred title is. You won't find us putting stuff like that in terms of Facebook. We want to make sure everybody internally knows the importance. We want to know that, I want them to know that we've scrutinized it to make sure that we're getting the right things. But what we won't do is charge around necessarily externally. And that's not hiding, that's just around making sure I don't want anyone internally and any colleague to be exposed to anything that would be offensive or difficult for them, and so therefore we can keep them safe within that community. So I think you'll find, I speak a lot to DEI people and have done over the past kind of month or so, and some people have changed, but I wonder whether they've changed, you know, because they've been put under scrutiny, and are they getting it right in terms of what they're doing? But thank you for your questions, Zahid. And then Lisa, can you recommend what type of training we should provide for our diversity champions in order to support them in their role? Are there any specific courses you recommend? So we are very lucky, Lisa, in that we generate a lot of what we do internally. So we've got a great learning team that we can then get them to go and do it. So I mentioned we have a university, we've got a neurodiverse hub, and on that hub it's got guidelines for colleagues, it's got guidelines for line managers around, you know, how to make sure that they can be the most successful they can at work. So for example, we've got something called a workplace adjustment passport. So if you require certain things in the workplace, so it might be about lighting, it might be about noise, it might not be about hot desking, or be about hot desking, you know, that those are things that we've had internally. However, we have got some really great partners. So 3 of the partners I would highlight. First of all, in insurance, there's someone called GAIN, which is Group for Autism in Insurance, Stroke Investment and Neurodiversity, and they are creating guides that their members can use. Change the Race Ratio, which is looking at ethnicity leadership. It's chaired by Sir Trevor Phillips. We are founder members of that. Again, it's looking to bring out kind of case study. Well, it has got case studies and guides of how one can do that. And the final one that we partnership that I would highlight would be Progress Together, which is looking at social economic mobility. And again, they're bringing out the kind of guides and learning for colleagues to do, because, you know, we are fortunate in terms of our size. It's got there's some downsides and upsides to that, but that's where you would rely on the partners to make sure that they were giving you some really good, succinct and usable learning. Thank you all for those questions. And Jack, if I've missed anything, then please shout, but I hopefully have not. I love this slide, and I'll explain why. So very often we're asked, why do you do it? You know, is it a nice thing to try and do? So we have what we call life cycle surveys. So these are ask individuals questions about Aviva at different points in their career. So onboarding, so before they join, promotions and moves, so when they as they say they move upwards in the organization, family leave, change of work pattern, and then when they exit. And this is an exit survey. And so one of the questions is, you know, kind of like we just say, use the top 3 words to describe Aviva. If you look in the top line, every single one, the number 1 thing is inclusive. And it's inclusive right the way through, with the exception of band F, that some of our senior leaders have got it at number 2, which I'll take number 2. It's really important. I think a lot of, you know, people are saying, you know, is this commercially the right thing? It absolutely is. If somebody can be themselves, they'll thrive in the workplace. I'll give you another example. We have an engagement survey, which most organizations would have. During the engagement survey, you know, we asked 2 years ago a question about, is your leader interested in DEI? So, you know, do you see something that indicates they're interested? So again, to my point from earlier, that might not be anything in terms of leading a community. It might just be that they're asking and talking to people about, you know, maybe some of their circumstances. When we asked that question, if the colleague answered yes, they were nearly 2 times more engaged than if a colleague answered no, that their manager or their leader was not as engaged. So That's huge. I don't think anyone would debate that you want to have an engaged team. And if you've got an engaged team, then I think they're going to be more productive. They're going to be more happy. They're going to stay longer. It's going to be better for you in terms of as a leader and in turn the organization. So, it's not some huge, big kind of commercial statement around that I can tell you that because of DEI, we then sold this many products. But I can tell you that we have more engaged individuals in the organization, and that's why it's quite important to make sure that you have that. So again, this is just a small example of where I think you can encourage colleagues to lead more into it and leaders to lead more into it. So I'm going to go in a bit more detail in regard to actual communities. So I mentioned earlier there are 6 employee resource groups. So to give you an idea of how they're set up, each of them have what we call grandly a steerco, and within the steerco there are 2 co-chairs, and we have all 6 communities in our 3 markets, albeit they will come together. We then have, for each of those 6 communities, they have 2 group executive members that sponsor. So 12 group executive members, and they sponsor, join up and they sponsor the communities. They will have quarterly meetings with the communities that will facilitated from my team, that will talk about what's happened and what's happened in the past quarter, what is going to happen the next quarter. They will then be able to use the expertise of the group executive as much as anything they need them to lobby them for. And there's a couple of things that really work for this. So if you go back to where we were before, what we had was one group executive that did all DEI. So everything was kind of thrown in that person's direction. Can't do everything. You can't split up all those things. So we've now got, a far better voice for all of those 6 communities who are equally important. The other thing is, if you know many group executives, you know that they're a wee bit competitive. And so therefore, if you're able to say, oh yeah, actually, well, this is what this community is doing, that will drive some good behavior in regard to get them to do their community. So you'll make sure that you'll find that they really value that input that they can then give, and it creates some accountability for them in regard to making sure that that is part of their role. They are responsible, and therefore they will have ensuring that they can meet the objectives they will do. And one of the other things you do, that is the second point, which take them to the group executive. So what we do is once a year, 10 minutes, end of an exco session. So the exco session is the group executive meeting. Go in and just give a highlight of what's happened and what's going to happen, what the ambitions are for each of the 6 communities. So it goes over 6 different meetings. It's a brilliant session. I'm not a member of the group executive, but a lot of group executives, they can quite challenging meetings. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the meeting, they've got the 10 minutes to come and hear from colleagues and the work that they're doing. I think so. I really like the fact that they get that profile. The other thing is, if you then look at it from the point of view of the colleagues that are active, so the co-chairs or the steercos, I genuinely think it's a talent program. You're looking at leading, in some of our cases, thousands of colleagues. Now, you're not leading the way that I kind of a team leader or an exco member is doing so, but actually in some cases it's harder because these people are strongly passionate, they're invested in this particular area. It's about making sure that you can listen, you can help, and you can guide. And I'll go on. There are challenges to doing that, and I'll go on and talk a bit about them, which is good. And Battle, I note your question. I'm going to quickly get to this slide, and then I promise you I'll come straight to it. So to give you some of the candid challenges we had when we set this up. So we have had these 6 communities for about 5 years. And we set it up, we kind of set up a slightly kind of utopian view that we wanted to make sure that in terms of there would be a balance in terms of where we could on gender on the steercos and for the co-chairs, that we would have somebody who was active in the particular community that was doing it. And what we found is we got some really great, passionate individuals who are very knowledgeable in the particular community, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to lead it. Bearing in mind what I said, it's a big community. So actually what we then said is actually we need to kind of professionalize this. We need to have some criteria. We need to have some interviews. So somebody in my team who looks after the communities will then catch up with anyone interested. She's building succession plans to then say, look, do you understand this is a big job? Let's talk about how you would manage it, particularly some of the areas where there will be some challenging. And then make sure that that person is set up and to succeed. So we use external training. Anyone that's in insurance will know Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London actually, because they facilitate a huge number of brokers, there's a lot of help. So we, as a big insurer, partner with them to try and help. And so there is a case of meeting other co-chairs and other steercos. So that really, really works in regard to doing that. I've put in this line slightly to provoke. Member of the community or parachute in. So this is about, do you appoint somebody to be a leader of your communities? And so my view here is that I think it is best not to, but there might be times when you want to ensure, for whatever reason, you want somebody to come in and to go and do that. And there are times when you have to say to somebody, I think it's affecting you because either it's too much work and it's affecting your day job, it's your resilience has been tested, and there might be a case of you go for a short time, I need to bring somebody in to go and help. And so there isn't a hard and fast rule, but it is something you should do. When I mentioned earlier about the challenges we had with our Pride community, like for the organisation, that was really tough. For those individuals, it was really, really tough. Their resilience was sorely tested. They're passionate about an area of our organisation that's very well established, and we're not able to go and do something that they've done for years and really wanted to go and try and do. But our priority, which I think, well, in fact, I know was respected, was it was the safety for all, and we wouldn't put somebody out wearing Aviva emblazoned t-shirts and tops if we felt there was anybody that was going to, for whatever reason, target us. So, there's a whole host of factors, and this is where judgment comes in for individuals in the community as much as those. But what you have to do if you're parachuting in is you need to be able to speak to people about why you've done that. You need to be able to give them some clear ideas of how quickly, if you are going to change it, you're going to change it. So it's really important you get that right. Electing or appointing co-chairs. So we've moved to appointing rather than electing, as I mentioned. But just talk to people. The most important thing is that everything in a community is wholly transparent. Everyone's got to know what's happening. So that's really, really important. Clearly manage ambitions. So what I'm meaning here is that if you are very vested in a particular community, you will come with all of your experience and enthusiasm and want to make an impact. And that's great. No challenge around that at all. There's only so much you can do. If you take that individual times it by 10, you can't achieve all of that. So you just need to be clear in the same way you do in business, right? What are your top 3 priorities? Agree them, sit with them. There might be things that's not included. So we unquestionably think, well, I wanted us to focus on this. Can we note that? Can we see how we can maybe try and do it, next year or another time? But let's stick to some really clear ambitions and make sure everybody's bought in. And unfortunately, inevitably, that means people aren't necessarily disappointed, but that we need to be candid with them, and that's what's really, really important. All communities are equal. Yes, they are. So it's, again, slightly provocative, but they're not all going to get the same level of funding, because there'll be ways in which you'll be doing things that means somebody might get a wee bit more spent on them because of a kind of another output. So an example, part of our branding was around sponsoring a Pride Parade. So we did that. And that meant that they were getting a bit more than some of the other communities will, because it was a dual link with branding. In terms of the actual money, the discretionary spend they have for partners or whatever, yes, it is exactly the same and should be. But there are times when there might be something you might get a bit more, because there will be something you can build on. And sometimes, if I look at the partners that I mentioned earlier, there are the variances in terms of cost. But genuinely, and I ask everybody here to do the same, if we can petition to say, when you're speaking to them, well, this is what I pay somewhere else, why should I pay you more? There's huge inconsistencies in what we pay, and I'd far rather be in a situation where we're being more equal with the partners that we have. But they're absolutely equal. Some will get more money. We just need to be honest about it. Again, it's just about being upfront and saying, look, we are going to put some more money in here because, you know, it's coming out of brand or it's coming out of technology. You know, we could never have done changing our legacy systems to allow somebody to put in MX unless there was a significant investment from our technology function. Because anyone who knows about legacy functions, they are really, really hard to change. And therefore, we needed that. So it's just letting people know that's why you've done that. And the final thing I've written down here is lobbyist or a conscience. So lobbyist stroke conscience or enforcer. It's kind of a bit of all, but the only, so lobbyist is good. So I used the word lobby intentionally when I said the carers leave. Should we be doing paid carers leave, which we've chosen to try and do? Now, actually, it would be unfair if I took away the credit from our head of policy, who was, you know, Anthony Fitzpatrick, who's brilliant. He was very much driven in terms of that. But this community helped significantly, lobbied, this is a great thing, this is what we want to do. So they are partly lobbyists, but they're also, and this is why I wanted to, they're also part of the firm. So what we can't have is conflict or competition. So what needs to happen is that we work together, the community to work together, and the way in which we do that is my global inclusion partner, Sharmini, she brings them all together. That's what's really, really important. And my team know them all. So Ori, Siobhan, they know all the communities, and they will be working with them to make sure that they can know what all the others are doing and what's the art of the possible. But I can't emphasize enough, if there's some sort of conflict, it's not going to work. You know, we've got to be all together, got to listen, got to then agree, this is what we're going after. We're going to share it through the different forums, but that's what we're going to go after. I'm just going to stop and take Batul's question, and thank you for your patience. The question is, what can Aviva do to educate those who are not of an ethnic backgrounds or not part of the communities or willing to be open? Being visibly a minority, I've experienced situations where I feel others are uninformed, unaware, and are firm in their bubble. Goodness, Batul, there's a lot there. So let me tell you what we've done, and you see what you think. So the first thing is we did 3 years ago, we asked all colleagues, and I used the word politely ask, but it was guided for all colleagues to complete our anti-racism training. And that really went into helping everyone to understand that actually some of the unpleasantnesses that people receive at work and out of work, be upfront and tell people, share it more with people. And I think it's interesting you use the word bubble. I think there are some that are unaware. I think there are some because they're not active bystanders. And by what I mean is, and we're trying to encourage everybody to be more active, is if you walk past something that you slightly sense might not be kind of right, you carry on because it's got nothing to do with you. I'd rather have an organization where the culture allowed somebody to say, all right, just talk me through what happened there, and have a conversation with somebody about how they can be a bit more active. So, and to your point, it's a couple of the words that you've also used, which are, you can absolutely resonate. Being visibly a minority, you know, is really challenging, and there are some real challenges. We had, you know, last year after the UK riots, there was a whole number of communities that were affected, and the organisation, rightly so, sent a note saying, if you do not feel safe, you know, particularly we're across the UK, we're in different offices, you must speak to your leader, make sure that everything is right in terms of you. So I think an organisation's roles, things like that, we sent out that note to all colleagues. We did the training that was for all colleagues. We massively push these communities. So my view in the communities is actually, if you live our values, you should be a member of our communities. And half of the people are. And then you do that consistently. And we don't change our tact. So to the previous question about some of the external noise, we've not changed our tact. We've maybe looked at what we're doing. We've made sure that everybody is in a good place in terms of understanding, but we haven't changed our tact. Jim has asked, do members of the groups have to sign a code of conduct about their behaviour, respectful, responsible, fair, etc.? It's a really, really great question, Jim. So they don't, but there is. What we have are called values in action. So this is about the behaviours that all colleagues have to have. And so I will happily say to somebody, and have done, certainly more than once, you know, I don't think you're demonstrating the values of the organisation. And that's the way we get around it. So rather than getting them to sign that, we talk a bit about actually those values. We've got to talk about your behaviour. We articulate them really well. So there's lots of different ways in which people can see them play out. So what you've got to make sure is, and that would involve being respectful and responsible. So we want people in that. But it does prompt me to also talk about things like open forums. So we use the platform called WorkVivo. it is an open forum, so if somebody puts something, you can then go and write what you want, and that's where we would heavily, I would say it would moderate to say if somebody puts something, and some people try and be a bit clever in terms of how they're provoking, we'll go back and say, does that sit with our values? Does that really the behaviour we want to try and push something to the edge? So we'll be quite upfront, and we will regularly tell somebody, ask somebody to take it down, and if we do feel it's crossed the line, we would just take it down. So we're quite clear, and there is an interesting thing is sharing some of that so people know means that we don't have those conversations very often, because people will understand that actually, you know, there is a respect I need to get, and if they cross the line, as I say, we would jump on them. It's an interesting one, because you want people to know that if the line is crossed, action will be taken, without necessarily, you know, making someone a villain if they've had the right intent. So we certainly, there's things that we do in that regard, Jim. Thank you. So I'm just now going to move on to, I've got a couple more slides. So what's this? This is me. So this is me is the campaign name we have for colleagues sharing with us all their various different characteristics. I could tell you that we were very grateful to a number of organizations we spoke to. There's a lot of companies whose title is This Is Me. I could think of Nationwide, BBC and Channel 4, who we visited. They were brilliant in sharing everything. And what I really love about the DEI space is people share. You know, I'm doing this now, we'll tell you there's nothing hidden, because it will make it better for all of us. So what we do in regard to this is we ask everybody to say, look, why, this is number of campaigns, why should you share your personal data? And this is some of the most personal data you would have. So we need to make sure people know that no one could ever look at it. We aggregate everything. So that's what we do. So we can then say what percentage are gender non-conforming, or are Christian, or whatever. So it's about aggregating it, which is really important. But once we've got that, it really helps us to make sure that we can then use it to help us. So I could tell you that marginally on our employment or engagement survey, our ethnically diverse colleagues are marginally more engaged in total than white colleagues. So why is that? Is that because of some of the origins community, some of the activity we've done? You know, so it helps us to understand. But I could tell you that some from within the LGBTQ plus community are less so. I can do that because I've got that, and I can then create some action plans. I can use the comments that people make to go and understand what it is we need to do. A couple of things on it. It's really hard. The technology is tough. So this is not as easy as just saying go and put it onto a computer. So whatever HR system you use, all I'd say to you, if you haven't started doing this, get that bit right, test, and then go out. Make sure your questions are spot on, and go and speak to companies, you know, that you know really well, and ask them what questions. So for example, when I mentioned social economic mobility, we first answered the question, if you were schooled in the UK, were you eligible for free school meals? Because that was means tested from about 1983. We also asked them if they were the first in their generation to go to, first generation in their family to go to university. And then we added the question about parental occupation at 14. So we had to then go back to the people that had previously completed it. So just get that bit right at the beginning. And then go on a campaign. And the campaign should be, in our view, that you can do what you want, should be about everybody. So yes, you should have a leader saying it's important, but then have people that go in and talk about their experience, and make sure it reflects the population of the organization. So very often people will go around and say, you know, all right, I must go and, you know, make sure that the pictures are, you know, all of ethnically diverse colleagues, or older or younger. Make sure it's a really good balance. Tell some great stories, you know, and in that story, if your organization is similar to us, and you might have quite a large population that are kind of quite middle-aged to love playing golf, have a story about someone who's white middle-aged playing golf. Nothing wrong with that. Make sure it's authentic, and you would do that. Brad's had questions, so I'm just going to quickly go and read it out. It would be interesting to understand some of the thinking and rationale that goes into some of the wider D&I initiative from a cost perspective. So the MX was an interesting example. I would love to see how we make these decisions, especially where it is not clear that there's going to be immediate payback. So we do actually a bit of work in regard to speaking to other organizations about what they have done and the take up from that perspective. I can tell you from that, so we haven't overly advertised that. And we had within the first week of over 800 people that had chosen to either change or join on the MX. So from the perspective of, is it being used massively? We used some work in regard to, so you may be aware of some work that Harvard Business Review has come out with in terms of the next generation. So Generation Z, so the one that is at school and some in the workforce now. It stated that it believes that 30% of that generation will identify as non-binary and gender non-conforming. So now, whether they're right or wrong, time will tell. Even if it's half right, still 15%. So from that perspective, there's a commercial imperative around making sure that we've got something that is inclusive and welcome to all. And so that's where you make it, rather than necessarily a business case around what would the immediate, because I think there's a payback that we've already seen, but it's potentially for the longer term as well. And thank you. Final slide, and then if there are any questions, great, and if not, we can close. So all I say here, this is the final. Every individual in our organization, and say in any organization, I made the point about how can you seem to be engaged. Just some of these things, not them all, one or two, make it personal. So talk to your team. Every time I go into start something internally and we're happen to be talking about diversity, I'll always say, does everybody here know somebody who's got a neurodiverse condition? And believe me, everybody sticks their hands up. So it might be a case of saying, well, I've got a children, I've got a family member, so I understand a bit more about it. Only do it. Doesn't have to be a war story, just has to be a bit about yourself, but only if obviously it's authentic. Talk about key decisions. Celebrate difference. There are many cultural things throughout the entire year, and one of the things that I get for example, which might be Christmas, it might be Easter, it might be Eid, it might be whatever it might well be. It might be we've just come through Lunar New Year. You can celebrate them all. You can do whatever the energy is, but do celebrate. Don't be shy. We've got something called license to hire. That is just about making sure that we hire across a broad spectrum. So making sure you're hiring on capability, not necessarily on the organizations that they work for. There's a particular challenge in insurance because everybody in insurance knows everybody. Believe me, they do. Challenge your leadership team. Make sure you go to so that's in that bit there. Set a community up and get people to join it. Be curious. Mention being an active bystander. We've got a community calendar. What's coming up. Right, well, I can see what's coming up, in terms of now, we're going to Ramadan, we're going to have Easter. It doesn't have to be faith-based, but there are things we've got International Women's Day. What be there? Can't celebrate everything, but one or two people might want to do something. Be supportive when somebody comes out, really, really important in whatever form that is. Focus on capability, I've mentioned. Complete the data, and I'd see there's a question which I'm just going to get in regard to that. Use the engagement surveys your organization will have. Promote the materials. When I say DEI site, this isn't going in there and just saying, where you can sign up for whatever you want. This is going in and saying, I've got someone in my team who has a neurodiverse condition. I want to be a better leader, or I want to be a better colleague. But all those things, and be a role model. I'm just going to quickly go and answer. So Zahid's come back for a question. Bear with me. So this is me. People with ethnic backgrounds will be apprehensive in filling in this information. They may not know how it will be used, especially if they encounter workplace bias. I think education by Aviva and how it will be used to increase these rates. I think it's a really fair point, and we know that. We know there's strong ethnicity within in my team in terms of the ethnic diversity, and there's it's always saying somebody's really got to trust you to give you this information. So, and to your point, what are you doing and how are you using it? So a couple of things in terms of how we're using it. So we do an ethnic pay gap and have done for 4 years. So that's not, you don't have to do that. We think it's important to do it. So we do an ethnic pay gap. We have set a target in terms of diversity in terms of our leadership and also within the broader population. So that's, if someone would say what's the immediate, that's why we're doing it. But I absolutely get your point. The organization has to work to be able to get that from somebody. Thank you, Zahid. And then finally, Rachel, the current situation in the US is heartbreaking, but it's resulting in some large organizations withdrawing DEI initiatives. Do you think this will weaken our strength and attitudes and commitments in the DEI in the UK? So Mike, I mean, first of all, this is what I suspect rather than necessarily know. But what I suspect, Rachel, is that actually you won't see a huge amount of change because organizations are held to account by their colleagues. And if you've got things like we've got here, if I start changing things, there's a lot of people that would then say, wait a minute, why have we changed? So we're not changing, but people will be more considerate and considered in what they're going to put outside. And that isn't necessarily because they're being shy or putting something under a carpet. I am not putting our colleagues in a situation where they're going to then receive any sort of kind of prejudicial comment externally on whatever platform that is. So there might be a bit of kind of navigating. Will be definitely be scrutiny, and there should be scrutiny. We should absolutely turn and say, are you doing the right thing? Are you disadvantaging anybody? And there are some cases in the US where organizations were candidly disadvantaging certain groups because they were focusing on only on particular groups. We've got to make sure it fits for all. That's really, really important. So, it's just, look at what you're doing and make sure it's making a difference. It's going to be right. It's engaging for everybody. Would be my sense. And look, for anybody that's upset, and there are a number of people upset, with absolutely everybody that's upset, I would have confidence in the organization you work for that they'll do the right thing. I think that's it. Is there anyone got any other questions or any other comments or observations at all?
Jonny, I just want to say a huge thank you for hosting today. Some really good information, and thanks to everyone for all the questions. Some really insightful stuff there as well. So I don't think there's any more coming through. So I think we can probably end it there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jack. Thanks all. Speak to you soon.